Okay, so recording has started. So for purposes of the recording, I'm going to go back and repeat some of what I've already discussed here. So again, this is the syllabus, or I'm sorry, rather the Canvas site for our class. If you are watching this recording and you are a member of one of my other classes, you will want to refer to the Canvas site for the class that you're enrolled in. For the class that I am currently discussing and reviewing this information with, which is my African American History Monday, Wednesday, Friday Zoom section, you want to click on the link labeled syllabus, and opening the syllabus in a new window brought me here. And for purposes of making this easier to see, I have made the syllabus full screen view. So again, this semester's major project will be for you to produce a podcast. And this is an assignment that will comprise several smaller assignments plus the finished product. The finished product that you will be handing in is, in addition to a podcast, is going to also be a context research essay. More on that later, okay? For now, I want to focus on the podcast itself. As it states here under the section labeled "What is a podcast?" podcasts come in all shapes and sizes. That's good news for you because it means that you have lots of room to be creative and make something that you're excited about. Some podcasts, like This American Life, and if you are accessing the syllabus online in Canvas, you will note that there are a number of embedded live hyperlinks that are designed to take you to examples of podcasts that you can listen to. So this is an example of one. This is so that you can get an idea of how podcasts are produced, how some of them are structured, so that you can get perhaps some inspiration on how you might want to produce and structure your own. So as it says here, some podcasts like This American Life are long, sometimes an hour or more. Others, like Kind World, a podcast from WBUR, are less than 10 minutes. So if you want to find a podcast that is more in line with, from a time perspective, the length of time that you want to shoot for, this is probably one that you will find more useful. Some podcasts, like NPR's Up First, are about news. Up First comes out every morning, and the hosts talk about the news and feature stories from guests reporting on the news. Other podcasts tell stories. Lots are funny. Some feature people having conversations. Many are educational. They teach listeners about a specific topic. NPR's Hidden Brain is about science and human behavior. And there's Planet Money, a podcast that's all about money and life. You will be free to produce any podcast you wish, so long as these two conditions are met. And here are the two conditions. Number one, your podcast has to be 8 minutes or less. And number two, your podcast has to deal with some aspect of a topic related to content that is covered in AMH 2091. Now, I'm going to pause screen sharing for the time being momentarily so that I can make eye contact with you and to take the opportunity to field any questions anybody might have at this point. When we say we want topics related to African American history or the African American history experience, you have so far completed 1 unit of study in AMH 2091. If any of the topics that we have talked about or have been covered in chapters 1 through 4 of your book, or have been covered in lessons 1 through 4 of Canvas, struck any chord with you or resonated with you in any way, or you found really interesting, then have at it. I'm allowing you to make your topic of interest sufficiently broad And then where you'll be able to narrow down from there what specifically you want your podcast to be about. So for example, and there's going to be a podcast plan worksheet that I will have you fill out. It's not quite ready for me to launch just yet. I hope to have that ready by Wednesday, and you'll have the weekend to fill it out so that you can give some thought to what it is you think you might want to do. But let's say Bacon's Rebellion was a topic that you were interested in. What you want to drill down and make your podcast about is perhaps some specific element of Bacon's Rebellion, so that you will have a podcast that will yield you content that's 8 minutes or less. You don't necessarily want to do, and I mean, and understand, let me rephrase that. Maybe you want to make your podcast about Bacon's Rebellion in its entirety, but just keep in mind what your time parameters are. Now, if you go over by like 1 minute, that's fine. But I will say there are, what, 31 of you in this class, 30 or 31 of you. If each one of you went over by a minute in your podcast, that would be an additional 30 minutes, which isn't a huge deal. But if you all went over by like 5 minutes, then it becomes a bigger issue for your dear instructor. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm just being honest. I want to give, each one of your podcasts the individualized attention when I evaluate it that I think it deserves. So if we're all kind of being mindful of our time, and the best way to do that is to make your podcast as specific as you can, because remember, the parameters are 8 minutes or less. Now, as far as, is there a minimum length of time? I would think 4 minutes is a respectable amount of a minimum length for a podcast. Okay. I know that there are some podcasts, like as a matter of fact, I shared one with you, Black History in 2 minutes or less. I know that there are those, and that would be considered a podcast, by the way. I know that there are some who that are that length of time, that are that short. But trust me, the shorter your podcast is, the more difficult it is to produce. I know that does not make a whole lot of sense, and it's counterintuitive in a way, but it's, you're just going to have to trust me on this one. All right. So you want to keep the ideal length for a project like this is between 4 and 8 minutes. Questions so far? Understanding that I will be reviewing other pieces of this project. Okay, let me go back to the guidelines. All right, probably one question that some of you had was, do you need fancy equipment to make a podcast? The short answer is no, you do not. There are ways to make a podcast without buying expensive microphones and recorders. Let me just stop right here. How many of you have made TikToks? Y'all know how to do TikToks? Okay, some of you have, some of you haven't. I will say to those of you that have made a TikTok, I think it's more complicated to make a TikTok than it is to do a podcast. That's just my opinion, okay? If you can do a TikTok, you can totally do this assignment. Because the most basic of all podcasts is you talking into your phone while the phone is recording you. That's the most basic of them all. And then you going in and using one of the free software programs that I will recommend, you putting some free like background music to snazz it up a bit in terms of production quality. And that's it. That's basically a podcast. Okay, that's the most basic one. Now, podcasts that get a little bit more creative and complex from there might involve you interviewing someone, or might involve you asking an expert or a third party to speak to the subject of your podcast, both of which are permissible. okay? Both of which are permissible. I'm really giving you a lot of free rein here. Understand that the more effort you put into production quality and production value, the higher your grade is likely to be. So a basic podcast will fulfill the basic requirement of the assignment, but it may not get you an A. Okay? So if you want an A, you have to put in a little bit more effort. But what I'm telling you is, in order to get an A, it doesn't require that you invest in pod mics and, you know, subscribing to some software program that's going to do all the gee whiz bang stuff. There's a lot of gee whiz bang you can get for free 99 if you put forth a little bit of effort and creativity and time. Time is your friend in this instance, because you're going to basically have Veterans Day weekend here in the mix coming up, and Thanksgiving weekend to, you know, actually produce your podcast. I wouldn't recommend you waiting until the day before your podcast is due to try putting it together at that point. That is when you could run into problems. But if you plan to do a little bit towards completion every week between now and when it's due, you should do just fine. So the next thing we're going to review are the steps that will be needed to produce your podcast. So step one, which frankly, in my opinion, is probably the hardest step, next to doing the research context essay, which, you know, I'll get into again, as I said, in just a sec or in just a minute. But in my opinion, deciding what topic you want to do might actually be the hardest thing for some of you, because it's a matter of narrowing down what your interest is or what your interests are, okay? So as you can see here, I'm giving you a broad range of pre-selected subject ideas or topic ideas that you might want to consider. For example, which event from African or African-American history do you wish you could have witnessed firsthand and why? What was the most significant event of African-American history and why? And the list goes on, okay? Other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was the most consequential African-American leader of the 20th century? Okay, here's one I hope some of you will find a challenge and want to tackle. Produce a podcast dedicated to a musical movement or group, a television show, or a motion picture film of 20th century African-American culture. If somebody did a podcast dedicated to like comparing the plot line, the storyline differences between, say, a show like The Jeffersons versus a show like Good Times, both of which were popular television series of the 1970s that had a very definite, or left a very definite imprint on Black culture. I mean, some of you, as I mentioned those shows now, can probably say, oh, I watched that show, or I know my mama or my grandma watches that show. If somebody were to do a podcast on that, I tell you, I'd be thrilled. I see potential here for, you know, featuring selected clips, great, you know, moments from either one of those shows. Anyway, let me not prejudice you, but I'm just saying, this is a project that I'm hoping you have some fun with while learning something at the same time. So that's all I will say about topic selection. Again, I will be asking you to fill out a podcast project worksheet. And on that worksheet, I'll be asking you to list your top 2 or 3 topic ideas, just to demonstrate for me that you've given this some thought about what it is you might want to do. All right, step 2. Step 2 says to do background research on your topic. The research you conduct will form the basis for a brief context essay on your chosen topic. Now, it is here, or actually that's on step 3. Okay, so I'll keep going. You must consult a minimum of 4 sources, 2 of which must be primary sources. Now, in the event that you were not clear on what a primary source is, I embed here in within this section of the syllabus that deals with this project, I embedded a YouTube video that is less than 5 minutes that clearly, and in my opinion, very thoroughly explains, even though it's less than 5 minutes, a 5-minute video, what a primary source is, okay? Now, at this juncture, I am going to switch screens so that I can pull up for you the TCC Libraries homepage. This is the TCC Libraries homepage. Now, before I get into this part of the workshop, let me just find out how many of you are familiar with academic databases. In other words, when you've had to do research papers or research projects in the past, how many of you have consulted resources from an academic database over just doing the Google thing? And if you've done the Google thing, that's fine. I just kind of need to know the level of familiarity that I'm dealing with here. So essentially we do the Google thing when we want to do research. Okay.
No, sometimes I go to the library and get a book.
Most of the time, so you actually make a physical trip to campus for the library?
Yeah. Well, that's when it was open, so I was there.
I'm sorry. I feel like
I mean, like, that's before COVID. I mean, that was like freshman year.
Okay, so since COVID, had you made very many trips to the library?
No, not really, unless I want to print stuff for class.
Yeah, so I'm about to demonstrate for all of you, even those of you who may have ready access to campus, how you can do bona fide, academically appraised research. And this is not to knock Google, okay? Because, you know, frankly, I use it too. But as emerging scholars, it's time that we vary our research repertoire and we familiarize ourselves with more scholarly vetted material that in turn makes our work more credible. So for purposes of this assignment, I'm going to ban the use of general Google. Now I will tell you, will I have a way of knowing if you've Googled something or not? One dead giveaway will be the source that you cite in your bibliography. If you're citing a source from, you know, say a website like Wikipedia or Britannica or some other, you know, very general, and then it ends in, the domain ends in .com, like from a .com domain, that to me is a dead giveaway that you Googled, okay? Because databases don't tend to direct you to sources that are from commercial domains on the web, which is what a .com is. Now, I just got a message here that says, is Google Scholar okay with you? If I had any faith in the quality of sources that a Google search would lead you to, I would have more faith in a Google Scholar search than I would just a straight up Google search. Having said that though, because you are students here at TCC, I want you guys to get the most out of the tuition dollars that you are spending by familiarizing yourself with databases that are so rich in content that I believe no matter what topic you do, unless the subject of your podcast is real like pop culture-y and real current, you're gonna find what you need to find in the database, okay? Now, if you're doing a podcast on the de-evolution of, I don't know, Kanye, which I'm not so sure Kanye, well, he would be like a borderline topic. If you were doing, for example, a podcast on, you know, say the influence of hip hop on, you know, pop music or something like that, you would find plenty of sources in the database, I promise. Okay. Would the information come from magazines like Source? Probably not. But you're going to get some academically vetted and therefore, in my view, higher quality pieces of information. So I've gone back to screen share to bring back up for you the TCC library. And just so you remember where we are in the guidelines here, we're now on step 2, which is going to lead into step 3. Step 2, do background research on your topic. You have to consult a minimum of 4 sources, 2 of which must be a primary source. Okay, you're going to watch the video to learn more about what a primary source is. Under step 3 now, which is where we are, write the required context essay for your podcast. It says here that this will be due at the midpoint of the semester and will be evidence of the background research necessary to produce your podcast. The essay is due Friday, October 30th. Not the podcast, but the essay, okay? To be taken for guidelines, or to be taken to, rather, the guidelines for your context essay, you will click on this link in the syllabus, where it goes over and into detail what a context essay is. Now, please ignore the due date here for your class. I'm not having you turn this in until October the 30th, not the 24th, okay? That's for another class. I need to change that for you guys, actually, so you all don't get confused. But this gives you all the information you need for the context essay, including how long I'm expecting it to be, the fact that you have to have 4 sources. 2 of them have to be primary sources. In addition to the essay itself, you have to include what is called an annotated bibliography. I have again an embedded link here that will take you to a video that briefly explains what an annotated bibliography is. Basically, if you've ever done a works cited page, raise your hand if you've ever done a works cited page for any other class at any point in your life. Okay, the only difference between the works cited pages that you've done pretty much all your academic lives and an annotated bibliography is the word annotated means with explanatory notes. It's a listing of all the references that you used to produce that research, but in addition to naming the books or the articles or whatever else you may have used for your research, you're including 2 or 3 sentences that you're describing what you use the research for. Like, I consulted this research to give me a better understanding of, you know, blah, blah, whatever it is, okay? And again, and I see your hand, Scaldi, if you go to the links that I'm providing for you here, where, you know, let's just click on one. This is an example of an annotated bibliography that our librarians here at TCC put together for you. It shows you how you list the source, you know, by the last name of the author, first name, the title of the article, if it's an article, the title of the book, if it's a book. In this case, it looks to be a website. But here is the annotation. Okay, this part is the annotation. So this is the only thing that you'd be adding that's different than just a regular old works cited page. Oh, okay. Okay, Scaldy, got you. So you didn't have a question. Okay, I understand. All right. The picture of the young lady who you see that I've embedded on this page, her name is Jules Bailey. She is the dedicated librarian for our class. I hope to bring her in at some point. I wasn't able to get her today, but I do hope to bring her in at some point and have her formally introduce herself to you. But she does have a copy of the podcast guidelines as well as the guidelines for the context essay. And if you click on her picture, you will be able to send her an email where you can schedule a consultation with her to help you do your research for the project. Okay? So you're turning in a context research essay first. Then from there, you're basing your podcast on the research that you do. You don't just jump in and do a podcast, okay? You do some research first. So is there any question about that? The podcast, the context research essay is due on the 30th, and you will be turning that into Canvas, okay? Question about the essay. That's step 3 of this process. So first you pick a topic.
If we wanted to get your input before we turn it in, could we get your input, like email it to you first?
Now that you would have to get to me on or before the 24th.
Okay.
Okay, if you want my feedback, that's a good question. And even at that, I'm not going to necessarily be like grading it as much as I am going to tell you whether you're on the right track or not, and if you're not, what you need to do to correct it, which I hope you'll find useful. So far here, let's review the steps. Pick your topic, okay? Do research on the topic you pick. Write a context essay about it, okay? This is really a 5-stage project or a 5-stage process. So far, we've reviewed the first 3 stages. This stage is due October 30th. I'm putting myself on a 1-week deadline to review those essays and get it back to you so that you will have your graded essays, because you are going to have to prepare a script for your podcast, which brings me to step 4. Okay. Step 4 is where you will prepare a podcast production plan, including a script. Okay. Script out everything you plan to say. If you're going to have people joining you, like if you're going to interview someone, script out the questions. If you are interviewing somebody, you obviously can't script how they will answer, but the part that you will be speaking to and the parts that you will be speaking, you do need to write that out, okay? Ask your questions if you're going to ask questions. Now, again, you don't have to interview anybody. It could just be you, okay? And along those same lines, I've been asked, can you work with someone else? My answer to that is I will allow you to work with one other person if you would like. It would have to be a member of this class, obviously, okay? But I don't think I would recommend making this a 3-person or a 4-person group project. I think you want to limit the number of people that you work with to yourself and one other person, okay? You don't have to do that. I'm just saying if you want to, you can. And if you do want to work with another person, then just limit it to one other person. All right. The podcast production plan, along with that script I'm recommending you write, that will be due Monday, November the 15th. It would be my intention and my goal to get those scripts back to you with comments by the end of that week. so that going into the Thanksgiving break, you will have all that you will need to actually produce your podcast. Now, I see that we are about to run out of time, but I want to point out that there are a number of free software programs available that are compatible with either Mac or Apple products. Some of you probably know about some things that even I am not aware of. I'm aware of Audacity. I'm aware of Beautiful, and I'm aware of GarageBand, all of which are introduced to you in that section of the syllabus that I've been going through all day, okay? It is not my intention to have you pay for premium subscription services to produce this podcast. Many of these software programs are tiered. So they have, one tier that's free and one tier if you're willing to pay the prescription price. Now, if you see a future for yourself as a professional podcaster, which, hey, let me tell you, people make some good money doing this stuff, that's on you. But I'm saying for purposes of this class, you don't have to invest any money in that for me, okay? Once you produce the podcast, what you're going to be doing is you're going to, once you produce it, it will generate a digital link that will be made, that will be available. It'll be a shareable digital link. That's what you will be uploading to Canvas as a part of your submission. So rather than submitting a paper for the podcast, you're going to be submitting a link. And the closer to the time that it gets to turn that in will be when I will show you how to do that. For now, because I know I did get this question, I do want to answer it. For now, the podcast itself will be due on, where's my, where did it go? Okay. Lost my window there. Hold on. Okay, completed podcasts will be shared during the week of November 29th. So the earliest that some of you will be required to turn your podcasts in would be Monday, November 29th, which is the Monday we come back from Thanksgiving break. The way this is going to work is that last full week of class, all we're doing is listening to each other's podcasts. So some of you will be doing your, having your podcasts listened to that on that Monday, some of you on that Wednesday, some of you on that Friday. And if we run out of time and we haven't heard everybody's, it will then spill over into the following Monday, December the 6th, which is the time that's been set aside for our class to conduct a final exam. On that day, we're given 2 hours, okay? So in the event that you did not get a chance to present your podcast on the 29th, the 1st, or the 3rd of December, you'd be doing your podcast presentation on Monday the 6th. And at this juncture, I don't know who's going to be presenting when, whether you're going to be on the 29th, the 1st, 3rd, 6th. I don't know that just yet. So just plan to have it done by the 29th, okay, of November. But everybody's going to have Thanksgiving break to work on it. All right, any questions? All right, we went 2 minutes over and I apologize for that, but we got a lot, quite a bit done. When we come back on Wednesday, we're actually going to be starting in on the first pieces of content that correspond with Unit 2. So if you want to read ahead, you can. For those of you that are overachievers, content will be taken from Chapter 5. We will be looking at how the Constitution dealt with slavery in the new country. So that will be the basis of our class on Wednesday morning. All right. If you don't have any questions for me, consider yourselves dismissed. We'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.